All right. It is time for another week of weekly sessions. I'd like to introduce Kai and Linda. Well, I guess, Linda, you don't need any introduction, right?
No, no, you don't I don't need an introduction. Y'all know me.
So, welcome, guys. It is time for another weekly sessions with QB Community Live. And this week we were talking about ideas on how to shore up your cash flow, basically. Now, we brought Kai on today because we had a conversation. Kai and I did actually not too long ago, and we were talking through some of the different concepts or aspects that I had about ways to kind of secure funding or money in the bank. And I brought up the fact in California, especially, that we have this ability that we can defer sales tax payments. And, as discussing through it, we kind of he changed my perspective onto it. So we'll dive into that in just a short bit. But first, before all of that, how's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good.
Doing
Kai, how
great.
you
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So today we are expecting to hopefully hear more guidance as to what's going to be coming for possibly more PPP loan money, right? Um, but until that money really gets to us or to anybody, we still got to keep everything kind of rock and roll and staying alive. So I know, Linda, you had a couple different ideas of ways that where people could kind of shore up some cash flow. What were those?
Well, one of them is actually that I've been talking to some of the attorneys about is a lot of times they have a lot of AR on the books. Most of them do. So starting to maybe work to get collecting the AR, working on, it's there, start to get it, maybe even making deals with people, trying to get the money in the door because I think a lot of them thought we weren't going to be closed that long, and then shifting to remote was going to just be a walk in the park, and then finding out that they did have a lot of people aren't spending money, so they're not going to the attorney unless they have to, depending on the type of law firm. So that's one of the things that working with, you got the time now, start collecting on the AR that's out there, that's, that you're owed, instead of, a lot of attorneys write a lot of stuff down. It's a good process to start to go through it, and maybe start to get a good work process in to not let things get 90 days out. So work with the staff and try to figure out a plan to not let it get so big.
That's a good point. I know we kind of talked about it, Kai, that in my experience in the past, if you don't tackle accounts receivables pretty quickly, it seems like about 75% can become uncollectible pretty quick. So I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like this before, or, it's as much as you can have people kind of pay up front would be great. But even with your business, you're focused on helping people with their sales tax reporting needs and audits and everything else, right? So
That's correct. Correct. And we don't get money up front. We don't take retainers or fees. So we're constantly doing the AR chasing. And right now we're already finding, because I've got my staff kind of expediting that a little bit, that unfortunately quite a few of our clients are not working. They're not open right now. And so we're trying to balance that medium between trying to force them to pay and be understanding, and trying to be very tactful and understanding with that. So it's kind of a struggle.
what I've found that tends to work, at least what I did in a again prior career, is when you have people that already have an outstanding balance, you make agreements with them if they still need the services because we still want to be there for them. Make agreements that we need them to pay for the services they're doing at this time, like so we're not getting further in arrears, right?
Yeah.
As well as a small amount towards the existing balance. Because even if you're just getting, let's say you're taking 5% off of it each time, it would take quite a bit of time to regain all of that money. But that's a way that you could still get more consistent cash flow coming in, be able to help them to keep them alive to actually be able to pay those bills in the long run.
Mhm.
That's kind of my suggestion towards it.
And Matthew, you've been like, I mean, the day before California closed, you were like, I'm getting a haircut, Linda, because I know I'm going to be stuck. And then now, when we were talking about this topic, you were telling me all the things you've done at your office, which I'm like, God, I don't, my office is in my house, so I have a different scenario. But you figured out a whole bunch of places that would save, and I would love
Yeah.
you to share them because no, they're really innovative. I things wouldn't even have thought of, and maybe other people are in the same boat. They wouldn't have thought to do because their office is kind of closed. It's not open.
So remind me if I forget any of them because I tend to do that.
Okay.
Um, we've got an office, and right now I'm in my home office. That's why it's so sunny here. There, wherever.
Yeah.
I went around and we don't know how long this is going to last. So we have a lease. We have no choice. We have to still be there. So we have to pay rent. But if we knew this was going to last a long time, well, we could turn electricity off, or we could turn internet off. We could turn off quite a few different things. However, I complicate that a bit more because I do want to be able to go to the office. I go there at least once, usually twice a week, socially distancing by myself since somebody's there, and pick up the mail to make sure we've got any money that's coming in, we can get into the bank. But I went around and I unplugged everything I could. We got a hold of the water company that we have our filtered water, and they gave us free service for 3 months because nobody's really using it. It's little things like that that you tend to forget about that can make a big, big difference.
Because you're the cleaning person, because there's no one there making the office dirty. You
Yeah.
might want to, and I feel bad for the cleaning people, right? Because they're probably sitting back with all this, not having any work to do. But yeah, the internet you talked about, just a lot of things, but don't shut off your security, because really
yeah.
need that right now. Because if, bad people realize the office building's empty, you open yourself up to that exposure. But one of the things that we've been doing, I've found with the law firms, is a lot of the law firms, which really kind of warms your heart when they all got together, the partners get together, and they're like, you know what, we want to keep our staff, because it's so hard to staff and get really good people. So they're cutting their salaries, they're not taking their payments, just to keep the cash flow moving, so the money's in the bank. Because typically law firms have some money in the bank, but we don't know how long it's going to be that's going to be like this, or even if do reopen and we do all the social distancing, if the worker's going to come in. So they're stretching the cash by taking a pay cut and doing it kind of percentage by the pay, so that the lowest paid or the lesser paid are not getting a cut at all. And I think it's really nice to see that they're trying to stay together and be a team players, and doing things that'll keep the good key people. I mean, you need the key people that maybe don't get as high a pay, but they're still vitally important to the law firm.
So Kai, I want to ask you if you have any other suggestions of like cash saving things in just a quick second. But before I do that, I want to ask everybody, as they're watching it this live in Facebook, or actually live here as well, thank you for joining us. Share some ideas. What are some different things, that we can share with everybody else that they can look into to save some money? Also, so same thing in Facebook is live as well. If you're doing it on the replay, be sure to put hashtag replay so we know, but we'd love to hear some other people's insights on this also. So Kai, before I ask you to dive into our conversation about sales tax and possibly deferring into that, have you found any other ways what are you doing for your own business to try to mitigate expenses to stretch this longer?
Well, one of the things that we did is we went through and looked at all the subscription things that I had for different software and for GoDaddy stuff and website-based stuff. And I tried to figure out what I really needed. You kind of lose track of that stuff that's sitting out there. You get the monthly bill coming in and, I'm going to use that later. I'm going to use that so I don't cancel it. And so we kind of pared some of that stuff down. Not a significant amount of savings, but still it's a monthly expense that we were able to get rid of for now. And when this is all over and we really want to tackle those activities again, we can resubscribe. That's been the biggest thing. We are fortunate. We don't have a lot of overhead. We have our rent and the basic technology stuff, but we're just trying to minimize the stuff that was more experimental, more for fun, more exploratory, and focus on what has to be done right now until we get through this. Because I'm also trying to limit the ongoing work that I'm doing for a lot of my clients so that they don't end up getting a significant bill right here in the middle of this. So kind of stalling that work. So it's a balancing act.
That's a really, really good point. I know if I was actually look at all the apps I've signed up for, and boy, I could probably save a lot of money if I actually cut a whole bunch of apps.
Yeah.
You forget
I save money by not buying domain names. I got about 80 different domain names that I've acquired. This is a good one. It's going to work for this. And nothing ever happens, but I'm not buying any more of those right now.
My favorite domain is cookyourbooks.com. I actually own two of those, cookyourbooks.com and cookyourbooks.com. So anybody who's got some good domains, stick them in the chat. Also, I'd love to hear about those as well. So, um, one of the things we were talking about with all these different loans going on, PPP, EIDL, all these different things, specifically in California, I'm going to talk about that for a little bit because that's where I'm located at. We have one of our clients happens to be an auto dealership. So their sales tax bill every single month is insane. It's like $30,000 a month. So I reached out to Kai. I was like, hey, what's the deal? What do you know about this? Because that's a lot of payroll we could possibly do and help stretch things further. And you kind of changed my mind on it. So what's your perspective on that? Like trying to defer sales tax?
Well, I think, as when you and I spoke, we deal a lot with our clients who, number one, we don't do a lot of tax collection assistance cases. Generally, unfortunately, those businesses have a tough time paying and they don't want to try to pay. And there's not a whole lot we can do. So we give them some advice and kind of help them guide their way. But what we have found historically is, even with our clients, deferring and not paying sales tax gets people in a lot of difficult situations. The CDTFA, and I don't know if you have anybody on this chat that works for the CDTFA, but I'm not going to tell them anything they don't already know. They're not as easy to deal with on the collection side as we would expect. And so they have these programs coming out that are being directed by the governor down through the CDTFA. These are executive orders. This wasn't the CDTFA collectors deciding they wanted to be nice people and let these businesses off. So that being said, I'm always not in favor of my clients owing the CDTFA versus owing somebody else. But sometimes it can't be helped. And this may be one of those times. This may be one of those times where it makes sense in certain circumstances financially, where the accountants and so on have determined that financially just does make sense. But there's still some pitfalls, in my opinion. And you've got several different options here. One of them is you can get a payment plan, and almost an instant 1-year payment plan where you can defer up to $50,000 worth of sales tax liability. But you can't be, that one is, you've got to be 50,000, but you can't be more than $5 million in annual taxable sales to make that happen. So this is directed at small business, by the way. That's why these criteria are there. They didn't intend to help the giant businesses that have a lot of cash. So if you have someone that has less than 5 million in annual taxable sales, and right now they're a little cash strapped, they can defer up to $50,000 in a 12-month payment plan. When I was doing my research a little bit more into this, you can go to the state's website and you go to where they have their payment plans, and there's some information there. And I'm not sure yet whether they have the information dialed in for these automatic 12-month payment plans. They talk about that they're going to, and they'll get that information out. And so presumably you're just going to be able to tell them you need this 12-month payment plan. They'll include up to $50,000. If you have more debt, more liability than $50,000, it looks like you're going to have to negotiate a different payment plan.
Makes sense.
And one of the problems with this that I foresee is anybody who does this needs to remember and keep in mind that this is just a deferral. The money's not being eliminated. There is no interest and no penalty, so it's not going to grow for this $50,000. But the other thing is you're entering into a payment plan, and generally, and I'm not sure if it's going to apply in this scenario because I haven't seen any yet. When you have a payment plan with the CDTFA, California Department of Tax and Fee, there's criteria that have to be satisfied to maintain that. And one of the criteria is you have to stay current. And if you don't stay current, you go into the first stage, I think is it's a warning stage, grace period. And if you don't immediately fix that, they can cancel the installment agreement. So my fear is that people will see this $50,000 deferral and jump on it, not keeping in mind if they can't make those payments, the difficulty they could end up finding themselves in dealing with the collectors. Now, is the state going to have friendly collectors when when this happens and it falls through and nobody thought about it, I don't know. But typically those collectors are not very friendly in trying to collect their money. So that's the concern I have with that program. The other program where you can wait to file your first quarter sales tax return now, which is due next Thursday, I think on the 30th. If you are filing a return with less than $1 million in tax, then I think it's $1 million in tax. Yes, for this one, you basically have an extension now till July 31st.
Yep.
It appears to be automatic, but once again, on July 31st, that's also the due date for the second quarter return. So now all of a sudden, if this thing is not over, what's going to happen? What are people going to do? You know, and you're going to have 2 returns being due and payable on July 31st. Maybe you exercise this $50,000 deferment. I don't know. But if you've already done that, now you got a return coming due on top of another return coming due. You know, will the state, you know, extend that and add another quarter? We don't know yet. So it's risk. I think there's risk.
You know, it sounds like, I mean, so I'm going to start off by doing this accountant's hat off, right? Business owner's hat on type thing. If you're looking at a scenario like this, the concept of it would be that, okay, if I'm not going to take and spend this money, which isn't mine to begin with, if I'm not going to take that money, if I need to put it aside, right? Maybe the PPP or the EIDL didn't come through for people. If you're able to do this within your state, we know in California you can, and you're able to utilize that money by putting it aside to help extend your runway to take care of things longer. The reason they're doing this loan is they recognize you may need to use this money for something else, and they're doing their best to give you an easy out to get a potential loan in one aspect. Now, of course, you can only take as much as you bring in as sales tax that you would still owe, of course. Any of these type of plans, or if you're going to go about any of these, you really want to have that separate account where you're tracking, you still owe the money. And it's a huge reason why you need a good accountant. I mean, unless you're just a superstar yourself, you need somebody that's really going to help track this stuff, make sure it's handled correctly, because when the audits do come a knocking, and I guarantee you the audits will be coming knocking after this is all done, because they're going to want to get as much money back as they can. You need to be able to validate that you used everything in a very concise way. Linda, do they do anything like this, do you know, in Florida?
When I looked it up, it said it was sales tax typically due on the 20th, and it just said defer to the 30th of April, but it didn't say anything like what you guys are having. I would just caution people on, you know, you're really not getting a loan from the state.
Yes, not a loan.
You're just collecting. Well, you're collecting it, right? You collect it and you're supposed to give it to them, and then you're hanging on to it. So you've got to be careful with, you owe that. What's that saying about death and taxes? Like, it's not money you want to like mess around with. I don't know. To me, I'd be afraid of that avenue. It has to be like a last resort to wait. And I didn't realize with what you guys have going on that they actually, if you take that money and not pay it and hold on to it, then they're going to make you pay it in payments. Like they're going to eventually come up with like 12 payments or.
Well, it's now. Now, you basically you're going to choose to defer $50,000 worth of payment, and you're going to apply for a payment plan, and they're going to divide the balance that you owe over 12 months. There's no interest, so it's just divided by 12, and you make those payments, and after 12 months, presumably you'll be caught up, and it's not costing you anything. No penalty for not paying it, no interest for deferring it, which is neither be the case if it wasn't for this executive order. There would be interest and there'd be penalties.
What would happen if you didn't make your, like, I mean, obviously if you're going to do this, make sure you can pay that payment, but what would happen if you didn't pay the payment? What would the interest?
That is the concern I have. Yeah. Typically in most installment agreements, if you aren't making the payments, there's a small window of grace. And then if you continue not to make it, they will cancel your installment agreement and go after you for all collection efforts that they can. And, you know, it gets messy then. It gets messy. And it can actually, in the worst case scenario, it can actually lead to you getting your seller's permit revoked, which at that time you'd look back and say, wow, I took advantage of this $50,000 deferment. I can't pay it. Time has gone on. They've tried to work with me. I still can't pay it. Now they're going to revoke my permit. Now they revoked my permit, and now I can't legally operate. Now what do? I survived this COVID thing. I saw this opportunity to not pay the money that I owe because the government said it was okay. And it just kind of mushroomed unintentionally, unexpectedly, but mushroomed into something that could become very even harder to overcome.
I had
Again,
one.
my mind is warped because I deal with these people, and I see their effort to try to make it easier right now for taxpayers. But like you said, Linda, you have to be careful taking this choice and going down this road, knowing that eventually the piper is going to come calling. And
Yeah, we had, well, there's so many opportunities, and this is when you really need your accountant, your tax professional, or somebody to sit down with you and help you through all these things that are coming up. I had one client over all the 25 years I've been doing this, and she didn't pay her payroll tax and 401k money that she collected and was supposed to pay, and she flat out disappeared off the planet. And they did find her eventually. Like, she went bankrupt and everything, she just went poof, gone. And they found her in Florida. This is when I was in Rhode Island. This is when I was in Rhode Island, and they found her eventually. It's hard to hide, So I mean, yeah, it's just not a good thing.
We just had a really good question actually in Facebook from Teresa, which was, what if someone already has a payment plan with the CDTFA prior to COVID? Would they not be eligible for another payment plan?
I would try. I don't know the answer to that because this new executive order is very new. So I don't know for sure whether you could roll that pre-existing installment plan over. I don't see anything that talks about it being a $50,000 liability resulting during this period of shutdown. It just says $50,000. And as a side note, also, there's another action that the state has taken with existing installment agreements, effective, I think it was March 22nd, right when this started. The CDTFA themselves, this was not an executive order that I'm aware of. The CDTFA themselves stopped taking the payments on existing installment agreements for 90 days.
Okay.
And I believe that was automatic. Again, I haven't had experience with my clients in those, but I do have the sample letter that seems to suggest that it may have gone out to most people that had a payment plan in place that says for these 90 days until the end of June, we're not going to take any payments. You can tell your bank not to send the automatic payment. And I think the deadline is June 22nd. Okay. So before June 22nd, if anybody that is in this situation, such as the person that you're talking to, the question, you would want to contact the CDTFA and ask them about getting help further. And at that point, maybe find out if the liability that you have can now be rolled in to the 12-month period. If you already have a payment plan,
I bet they just keep the payment plan going on top of it, right?
The difference would be under the new one, if you rolled it over, there's no interest. There's no interest. There's already not be penalty, but I guess it would stop the interest for the 12 months. But if you can't pay it off in 12 months, you're going to be back in the position of trying to get it into another payment plan. So I don't know the answer to that specific question. It's a very good question. Something that could easily be obtained by contacting the CDTFA.
So I would suggest to anybody that has any kind of challenges with the CDTFA, if you have not been paying sales tax, and if you don't want them come knocking on your door, you should not try any of this. It's probably not a good idea. But it's, this is one idea. And so we'll move back away from just California since we have a national audience. But the goal is every state's going to have some unique aspect of this. And there's so many different aspects of business we can look at to where we can either trim the fat or extend things. We talked about like utilities. Well, if you're not in your office, why not Why not call them up and say, hey, I don't want to cancel, but I don't need the same services. I don't want to pay for my high-speed internet if nobody's there.
Right.
Other items that we had, if I remember correctly here, were
Insurance too. I think you had talked about insurance, vehicle insurance.
yeah,
Not
actually,
driving.
that's a unique one. Sorry to do the California thing again, but I think other states will follow it. California has been pushing hard on laws to try to make it to where policy premiums for certain types of insurance will be returned back to the policy holders, especially for vehicle insurance. There's some crazy stuff like I would love to hear from people about workers' comp and their thoughts on workers' compensation insurance. Certain states are doing all these kind of crazy different rules. Why do we have to pay for workers' comp pay? Like, why is the wages paid during time not being worked? Why does that go towards workers' comp? Why do we have to pay premium on that, right? Um, so there's some crazy stuff there. Like literally, you should be checking with your insurance people to make sure that you're still covered. So if one of your employees trips on their own dog, they can't sue and say it's a workers' comp claim. Is anybody that's watching have any insight or like history with the workers' comp side of it? I'd love to hear about it.
And you can work with your vendors too. So if you've got some vendors that you owe a lot of money to, maybe work on some kind of payment plan for now. I know I own apartments up in Rhode Island, and we had one person out of 65 apartments that she's out of work and she doesn't know when she'll be back. So we're working with her to not have to pay the rent. She'd have to pay April. She's probably not going to pay May. We don't know how long it's going to go on, but we're going to try to divide up the balance when she does go back to work and just make it so that she's able to do it, and maybe even have to work with her with the security deposit at some point if it gets to be that way. We've also had several people that were going to be moving in and that had given us a deposit, and we have a no refund deposit thing in place, and we're stuck with some empties, but we gave the deposits back because you can't, ethically, I can't keep, they don't want to take the apartment because they don't know, maybe they lost their job. You just got to work with people, have a heart, work with people, and hopefully your vendors, if I have someone that owes me a lot of money and they're going to pay me something, and maybe not what I wanted, but something during this time, and really that's better than nothing. And it's just until this, it's such a crazy time that we're all living through for the first time. So it's just work with people.
Chris Weiss, my good old buddy, I miss you, my friend. He actually said the auto carriers are all responding differently. State Farm says users will get back 50%, and our Geico just announced they will give back 15% next billable period, which is kind of, I agree, ridiculous. Interesting with automobile ones. I don't know about everybody else, but I always have to validate my mileage. So, like each year, you have to actually prove what kind of mileage you have used. So theoretically, you should be able to prove that you weren't driving around as much unless you were already lying on your mileage already.
And Larry DeForest said too, with the high-speed internet, be careful, because if you do go and turn it down, they might charge you a reconnect fee or if you turn it off, you might charge you a reconnect fee. Same with utilities. It might cost you more to turn it off and turn it back on.
Yes. That actually is something we had to look into, which my internet is still turned on. So, but that is a good point. But again, like you were saying, just having everything unplugged was a big way to. It makes me feel better. That's for sure. What was the other ones we had? So obviously, we all know about the salaries, everything else. Oh, here's another one. If you are fortunate enough that you are in a position of adequate cash flow, talking to your vendors about special discounts right now for continuing to pay on time. They need the money too, right? That's a great way that you could save a couple extra bucks. I'm going to flip the script on it a bit and talk about other ways to stabilize cash flow. Is how can you bring more money in the door, right? Team up with other businesses, such as Kai and I teaming up with clients, right? If we're not doing stuff with sales tax because we don't want it, we can tag team up and try to do what we can to help provide more services to our clients, but at the same time helping lift each other's bottom line up a bit.
I've actually partnered with a firm out in Washington State, because she does collections, and she does collections for attorneys and architects in a nice way. So she's delicate. It's not like calling up, where's my money? I need my money. It's more done in a nicer way. And it's a good person for me to partner with, since I work with all these firms, that I can refer her. And if she gets somebody that says, oh God, I'm so far behind in my accounts receivable, I don't have a great bookkeeper or an accountant, hey, she can send one to me too. So one hand washes the other, but it's a good way to partnership. I mean, you had some crazy ideas for some partnerships too. Like, what was the
Oh,
dog haircut
well,
at the same time you get your haircut or something? When we
yeah, I'm
opened
getting time for that again. So, different clients we have and different friends around town. One gentleman is a hairstylist, right? And happens to also work at a pretty nice restaurant. So the ideas were like, well, how could you team things up, like, right, like a cocktail and a cut, doing something unique like that where you can get the cocktail brought in and do a personal haircut or something where you're not bringing tons of people in, just random stuff. Same thing with dog grooming. Like, my dogs would be dying in this heat, right? So we need to find ways that we can do these little things as we're waiting, be socially intelligent about social distancing, but still promoting and helping our small business owners around us stay alive is the goal.
Don't say heat in front of the Canadians because they're not exactly dying in the heat right now. And I have bad news for you. You can't buy spookyandcreepy.com or snarkyandbitchy.com. Laura Pink just purchased those. So those are out for you when you go to buy domains.
Kai, what's your favorite domain that you've got?
Oh, I have to think. I've got a variety of ones. I've got one for travel. I don't know. Most of mine are not very funny, like spooky and creepy and snarky and bitchy. Mine are mostly some variation of sales tax or use tax or something like that. So
Like, I hate
can't
sales
say
tax.
there any. No, that's a good one. I should try to get that one. Do you hate salestax.com?
I do.
Oh, I'm gonna look right now.
You said you weren't going to.
Well, we hope that some of these ideas have been helpful to people. We just wanted to do something a little bit more lighthearted and enjoyable. We appreciate everybody continuing to watch each week. And of course, we're always open to different suggestions, or actually for our group, QB Community Live members, anybody who is interested to join in, if they've got a topic you want to highlight, we're always welcome to it. If you want to highlight different businesses in your area, reach out to us.
Yeah.
It all comes back to together we all succeed. So, and on that note, I shall tell everybody, here's wishing you all a very successful week. Thanks.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.